beautiful afternoon with the House of Afrika. Today's topic will be the anatomy of ego. Is that right, Balabasu? Part 2. But prior to that, we have one of our Radasi sisters, Sister Dama Machi, that will come up and give us this enlightening story of hers, how she came to the path. So before we get started again, as in the tradition of the house, I need to ask for the permission of the elder to speak. Brother
Theravada. Yes, please make it so.
Thank you. And Edwina, I'm going to ask your permission also. Thank you so much. Again, welcome, welcome, welcome. Without any delay, because I know Donna Machi could hardly wait to get up here to this podium to tell this exciting story of what brought her up to the path of Ma'at. So, Donna Machi, would you please come and let us hear your story?
Rashekam. It's a pleasure to be here, even though I've been avoiding it for 2 years, but I guess it's now or never. The law would let me out of it this time. I don't know what I could possibly say that you haven't already heard. It is really, really fortunate to be able to stand here today. It took a long time for me to even get to this point in my life. I first heard the Guru about 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, at the Breakfast of Champions. And it was like everything else in my life. It just happened by accident, by default. Somebody else wanted to go, so I paid, and that day I was sick, and I didn't want to go. It was just really evil and complaining about everything, and I didn't start on time, and I was just really, really a mess. And we saw this man sitting back there in the back with this cream-colored outfit on. And June said, that must be Bhagwan. So after about a couple of hours, the meeting started. And somehow I forgot all about being sick. It was like, wow. And it was like it touched something so deep inside of me. And they had all these lists going around, and he said, if you want to be put on the list, go back. And they had 3 lists, so we wouldn't put our name on all the lists to make sure we wouldn't miss anything, that we would, somehow see our names. And about a month later, he called me. I had just gotten home from work, I think, or school or something. And I was so surprised, because usually people like that don't call you directly. They have a disciple or assistant call you. And I was just, oh, wow. I was so moved to think that this man cared enough to even call me. He didn't even know me. And I had no idea then that, 2.5 years later, that I would still be here. Because I don't stick with anything long. Once the challenge is over, or it gets boring, or maybe it gets a little bit too close and I have to do some real work to get out and leave. But I'm still here, so that's saying something about the teachings and the house of Ra and Guru. And it's like, this is my family. I mean, I just love them so. From the very first day I walked in the door, I was made to feel like a sister. And I hope that I can make you all feel the same way. You know how it is sometimes when it's like you're missing something, or there's something you forgot to do and it's nagging at you? Well, imagine spending your whole life like that. Your whole life is spent knowing that something is wrong, or you have this overwhelming sense of loneliness or emptiness, and it doesn't matter what you do, nothing can fill it. Not the drugs or the booze or the men or the jobs, or you get the picture, And, you're satisfied for a little while, you get a new job and you're all excited because you're making good money, and after about a year or two, it's like, oh, I'm sick of this job, let's go get another one. Or you go to school to learn something, and you devote all your time and energy to it and get all these A's, and then it's like, oh, whatever's just another subject, So you accumulate all this knowledge, you never do anything with it, and you don't have anybody to really talk to because nobody really understands. I mean, really, nobody really understands. And the Bible way, you know, the Americanized Bible way is not the right way because I grew up in the sanctified church and all we did was go to church sometimes 7 days a week. So there's nothing about the Bible that could tell me because I knew all this stuff already. But somehow I always knew that there was something I was supposed to do. I always knew that it had a spiritual bent to it. I just didn't know where to look. I was just completely miserable for 40 years of my life. And it is the most devastating feeling, to know that there's something and know that you have no one to talk to. I remember once I was talking to my sister and I think I saw a glimpse of something. And I've always seen this, but I had never opened up to anybody. And I told her, I said, I think I want to go to theology school. I think I should be a minister or something. It was just something I saw for a flash. This was, oh God, must be 15 years ago. I hadn't thought about that until this week when I was forced to confront these things that I thought were gone. And she just laughed and laughed, and it just hurt me so deeply. I never said another word to anybody else because, your feelings it hurts so many times, if you don't have any kind of spiritual basis, you really can't handle rejection that well. So I never said another word about that until today. I thought I was over it, but I guess I wasn't. And she never knew how bad she hurt me because I never said anything. But I was like, well, if I get rejection from her, well, I can only imagine what other people say, especially people who know me and know the kind of life that I lived and, stuff. If you grew up in the 60s and 70s, I don't have to draw your pictures, you know what we did. I know what I did. I don't know what you did. I know what I did, and trust me. And and it was like, well, if I decide to do this, well then no one's going to take me seriously because that's what they're just being dramatic again, or or just acting out or whatever. This is her new challenge now. She's going on to something else now. See how long this would last. So consequently, I never did anything because I was afraid to do anything for fear of rejection and ridicule. So then I said, okay, let's just go have some fun. Let's go party. And I know it's a hell of a way to lead your life. And Satra asked me one time, well, what brought me to the path? Well, it was a case of moral and spiritual bankruptcy. That was it. There was nothing else there. I had done everything else. So, after you do everything else, then you got to try something new, something with some meaning. Of course, I didn't know it was going to be this tough. I cannot tell you what it means to me to be at the House of Rock. I try to write about it. I can't even write about it. It's just so profound and so deep. I've been trying to work on something for 4 months, and for some reason it won't come together. Maybe the time is not right for it to come together. I was wondering a few months ago, I was doing some deep reflection, trying to figure out why I had such an aversion to a meditation. Well, for one thing, like the guru say, I didn't think it was necessary. And why should I have to sit down for 2 hours? This never made sense to me. 30 minutes, 45 minutes, I can handle that. But 2 hours? How can anybody sit for 2 hours? And we just went on and on and around and around about this. Because I didn't understand. Why is it necessary? And then one day in August, we did the Bardo teachings. We did the Bardo lectures, and I found out why it was necessary. Because no one told me that you went through these things when you died. I just thought you just, go and God tell you, well, okay, you did such and such a thing, so you go still down until it's time for you to be reborn. Nobody ever told me that you would suffer like that, or that meditation is the key to avoiding, rebirth in the lower realms and just suffering in general. You have to read it yourself to understand. But I was thinking one day in January, you know, why, trying to figure out why I had such a hard time coming to grips with this subject called meditation. And then I thought, I said, well, you know, meditation is like exercise. Now, if you don't exercise, you're not going to die. You can be a couch potato all your life, but if you exercise, it'll help you have a better life. So meditation to me is like exercise in the fact that, I mean, if you don't exercise, you know, if you don't meditate, it's not going to keep you from dying, but it will help you die a better death. At least that's my opinion. I don't know anything. I'm just telling you what the Guru said. And on my reflections on that, this is the way I feel about it. And it doesn't mean that I have not been knocked down since I've been at the house of Ra, but you know, you just have to get back up. Every time you get knocked down, because that ego mind is really, really tough. And it's going to knock you down. The people that just came, you're going to have good times and you're going to have bad times, but you cannot give up. You just can't. You know, because it does get easier. You know, it gets easier, but it's only to the point of how much work you put in. You know, and I didn't want to do any work because I figured like, well, you know, I never read in the Bible where you have to meditate. And all the religions, nobody ever told me. I'm the only person, people I know who meditate were the Eastern people. You know, the Hindus and the Buddhists and all these other people. So about 3 weeks ago, I decided that I was going to try to do like the Buddha, you know, and sit up all night long and reflect and contemplate. Of course, I only got 2 hours. After 2 hours, I was ready to go to bed. But in that 2 hours, I decided to reflect on karma and how karma relates to the law of impermanence. And I wrote it down somewhere. I can't remember exactly, but I know it's all related some kind of way. And that piece that I've been working on for 4 months, something came to me to put in that piece. For one thing, for the past few months, every day I get up, no matter how bad it is, every day, and as soon as I open my eyes, I say, thank you, Father, Mother, for giving me the grace and another chance of being enlightened. Because every day is a new chance. And I was sitting there trying to figure out, this is about 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to figure out what I want to put in this piece. And I don't write unless it comes to my, you know, I just don't sit and put something down because to me it's not genuine. And thought came to me and said, I would like to start each day with this realization. Is this the day I die? I don't know. Is this the day that I become enlightened? I hope so. Can I spread the Dharma today? Yes, I can do so. Because today is mine tomorrow.
Let's shake them.
Past the seeker, as he prayed, came the crippled, came the beggar, came the beat. And seeing this, the Holy One went into deep prayer and he cried, great God, you are a loving God. How can you see all this suffering and do nothing about it? And after long silence, God said, I did do something about it. I made you. Now, without any further ado, we'd like to introduce the topic of Ego Part 2. And of course, Guru Sahib, Bhagwan, Afrika. Why am I doing this? Part 2. And without further ado, Bhagwan, Afrika. Namo Vaheguru Guru Baya.
Again, as usual, my apologies to you. This has been a whirlwind week, and I just can't seem to find enough time to get to all the things I need to do, but of course, I'll always have to find time to this. but I apologize for my tardiness, and I hope you will forgive me. And it serves me right that I missed Dhammamarji. Most of you have taught. It's appropriate punishment. So my karma has been balanced. Your topic today is Ego Part 2. And it must have been a carryover from our discussions on ego before. And last time we talked about the metaphysical definition of ego as being the sense of separation. However, that is not normally how we understand ego. So perhaps we should start from where we are and work our way up to those higher levels of definitions and insights on ego. Normally you see by ego we simply mean an exaggerated sense of one's own importance. Actually you see what we are calling ego is really vanity. Vanity being a derivative of the proper state of ego. So we will start from the lower and work its way. And remember, one of the greatest skills that we will be challenged to develop in our lives is the ability to manage our own ego in the form of vanity. All saints say that there are 5 fundamental states of mind, negative states of mind, that when failed to be managed appropriately will result in loss of self-control and an increase in one's experience of sorrows and suffering and misery. And as most of you know, those 5 negative states are anger, lust, greed, attachment, and of course, vanity. Our topic today will focus in more on the vanity aspect of egotism. Although, please bear in mind that all 5 of these negative states of mind are rooted in ego. Remove ego and all of them collapse. But masters used to always say that the last one of these 5 barriers to enlightenment to leave us is this vanity, this false basis for our feelings of being more important than we really are, better than what we really are in the center. In fact, almost all of the conflict that we encounter in our human relations are conflicts between our egos, our vanities. And therefore, when we don't know how to manage vanity, the result is always conflict and chaos. Now again, by vanity I mean the arrogating to ourselves of qualities and virtues that we do not in reality possess. And then suffering from the illusion and the self-deception that we do have these qualities and virtue. We embark upon journeys. We find ourselves involved in situations where we are doomed to fail. One of the classic symptoms of suffering from this vanity, this egotism, this arrogance, is the feeling that we are somehow the only person on the planet who is intelligent. Strange. Actually, deep down inside, you really don't feel that people are as intelligent as you. Maybe just a handful. A Buddha, a Moses, a Muhammad, a Jesus. You see, maybe they were your peers, but outside of these great souls and beings, all other human beings are beneath you. You are somehow able to carry around the delusion that you're better than somebody. Trust me, we are not better than nobody. In fact, the comparison is not even warranted because you cannot compare something that is identical. I cannot compare apples to apples. You follow me? The reality you see is that the spirit that indwells in all of us is absolutely the same. The intelligence that flows in you is existing in all sentient beings, with no exception. The only difference then is the degree to which that being has been able to manifest their inherent intelligence. It's never a question of whether they possess it. Please enjoy the distinction. The Spirit is shining through that being, just as it is shining through you. Not knowing that whatever intelligence, whatever good qualities, whatever talents you possess has no connection with your little vanity. They exist by virtue of the fact that the Spirit is also indwelling and shining through you. And perhaps you have been fortunate enough to not have as many obstacles, as many barriers to the throughput of the Spirit as other people. But there is never any doubt about the fact that other people also possess the same intelligence. And beginning down with this kind of wrong view, and remember that very often the consequence of a person that suffers from this exaggerated sense of who they are in terms of their being better than others, or incidentally worse, because remember, that is reverse vanity. You see, because now you claim to be the lowest and the most humble and the most blah blah and the most blah blah person on the planet, right? But this claim to be the most humble is just another ego trip, because you're still making yourself number one. I am more humble than any other being on the planet. Look at the arrogance of that. Sheer arrogance, masquerading as humility, but does not look like humility to anybody who have really encountered it. You will be able to clearly distinguish their pseudo, false humility with the authentic humility of a Jesus or a Buddha or a Mahavira or a Moses and so forth. So we have to understand that this kind of arrogating to ourselves these qualities and virtues that we do not in reality possess can be used and disguised in all kinds of different ways. The ideal, however, is to bring attention to yourself as being somehow superior to all other beings, or certainly the beings you around, right? My brother, my sister, my mama, my daddy, you know, at least for sure, Bhagwan, I'm better than these folks. Now, you might have at some point when you go across the oceans and up into other cultures and countries, but as far as I can see in terms of my relations, the people that I am coming in contact with, I'm numero uno, you see, in the department of intelligence and compassion and sympathy and all these other virtues that we have co-opted that in reality. It is this kind of arrogance that must be managed long before we can deal with the problem of ego proper. We cannot begin to even make any headway in the evolution and the transcendence of ego. And remember, when we're talking about the transcendence of ego, does not mean the elimination of ego. Please make a note of that. Ego simply gets integrated as a tool to a higher sense of who you are. Just as when you become enlightened, you don't drop the body, do you? When one becomes enlightened, one still has to eat. One still has to sleep. You see? But one becomes body plus something. You see my point? So when we're talking about transcending the ego, we're talking about becoming ego plus something beyond ego. But the ego still remains a part of your operational equipment, so to speak, because it has its function. Please make a note that there is nothing within the inventory of our being that does not have a legitimate function. Therefore, the problem of ego is not ego per se, but to become attached to your ego and to think that that is the final definition of who you are is a ego, right? And the task of transcending our ego is simply to pull back beyond the ego so that we will have the discovery of being pure, naked, clear awareness without any kind of modification or modality. But long before we can do that, the mystic simply just starts us on the path of dealing with our arrogance, what we normally call ego and egotism. So perhaps, Setra, it would be interesting if we talk a little bit about that, and then we'll move as far as we can. Because the whole story of spiritual development and training has only to do with moving into deeper and deeper ego structures until one is able to transcend all of the lower structures. So ego is a thing that we will carry with us right up to the very threshold of enlightenment. It has its. Now again, I say that we all have this kind of arrogance. When we talk about our self-esteem, our high self-esteem, what in fact we're really talking about is the estimation and the opinion that we have formed of ourselves, right? And normally the contents of our self-esteem consist of nothing but virtues and qualities that we have borrowed and stolen from books and things of that nature, but in reality we really don't possess them. I am a hard worker. Even there's a kind of spiritual mythology. You see, arrogance is not confined just to your relationship with the people in your world. Arrogance is something that we are embedded in. It carries over even unto the past. So when we encounter our spiritual arrogance, you see, it comes out looking like something that we all should be admiring, when actually it's something that is very ugly, very ugly, and a great obstacle, and a very great barrier in making spiritual progress. Now, this whole structure of arrogance depends upon our inability to see at a higher level of reality. Now, I've already said that the reality is that in all beings there is this divine thing that is the source of all wisdom, all power. You see? And it reflects itself through these vehicles that we have. It is really interesting. One of Dhamma I did catch a part of your statement where you have shared with the audience your benefits derived from doing the deep contemplation and reflection on the noble truths of suffering and impermanence, etc. And that is a very, very useful practice, because what happens is you have a gestalt, right? It begins to remove some of the as Maharaji used to say, the smoke from your eyes. You begin to be able to see through the fog, and you begin to get glimpses of truth, of the reality. And when one is able to develop this capacity to do deep and careful reflection, and then open one's eyes and look back into this domain of reality, then one is going to be shocked to begin to discover, as you will discover when you move to higher levels of consciousness, that the reality that lurks behind all of these personalities and bodies is that same one spirit. Now, Satra, you and I are counselors and therapists, and we're in the business, and I'm sure all of us have children, friends, and have always functioned in the capacity of a supporter, nurturer, and etc. One of the most interesting things that I have witnessed in this whole effort to alleviate the suffering and the sorrow of another human being is that first we must approach that human being with great respect, with no sense of superiority. That requires a kind of deeper insight. And in therapy, you eventually you can become a good therapist. You learn how to put yourself in a certain frame of mind where you are able to see through the imperfections, shortcomings, and faults of other human beings. And remember, it is only your inability to see through the imperfections and faults of other human beings that gives you the illusion that you are better than someone. And it is also because of the externalized nature of your attention. You can't see inside. It is easy to see the faults and shortcomings and imperfections in other human beings because that is where our attention is oriented. We can only see outside. We have no ability to do insight. We can't see within ourselves. If we could, we will see in ourselves a whole battery and plethora of imperfections, shortcomings, and faults. You see? But because we don't have that ability, and we do have the ability to see out, we are very astute in picking out all the imperfections in other people without the ability to see the imperfections in ourselves. So the natural conclusion we come to is I'm without fault. And I am therefore better than that person. I don't see no fault in myself, but I see all of the faults in you. So therefore I must, by experience, right? By proof, by empirical data, be better. But as you are able to develop a little bit more as a result of training of the mind, training of your capacity to see in a very concentrated way, to be able to focus your mental vision, to open the eye of your mind so that you can see a little closer. What you begin to see, especially in therapy, is that inside of every human being there is something absolutely divine and untouched and unspoiled. And when you focus your attention on that part of the human being, your approach toward them is almost sacred. The old counselor says that you should approach this client as if you approach an holy God, because God is in other human beings. And as long as we suffer from the ability from arrogance, we cannot see the God that is in all sentient beings. And this is so critical, because how are you going to be a bodhisattva? What will be your motivation? If you do not have the ability to really see in a penetrating way the existence of the divine in all sentient, in fact, in all non-sentient beings, in all being, period. You see, at first, one develops the ability to see the divine in other human beings, because that's closer to your experience. But as one progresses, you become able to see the divine equally manifest in nature, and that causes you to come into an entirely different relationship with nature itself. One of the Zen mystics said that when you reach this state, trees are no longer trees. Trees are living beings, worthy of your respect. They are as sacred as Mecca, you see, and should be approached as such, right, with great respect and great awe. But not having that ability to see the divine in things, and especially in other human beings, causes us to come into very wrong relationships with each other. And that is why the mystics said that as long as we suffer from this arrogance, as long as we have not turned our view onto ourselves, and remember, not in the sense that you beating up on yourself, because you too have the divine in yourself. You too have worth and value in spite of your imperfections, shortcomings, and faults. Case closed. That's not even an issue. Understand? So it's not the ideal to try to look at yourself and remove all your imperfections, shortcomings, and faults with the ideal that you will then become perfect and entitled to your arrogant position. That's a very different approach. But we look inside ourselves, you see, to also see the God that is in us. And this is the amazing thing, that until you can see the divine that is in you, you will not, by definition, be able to see the divine that is in others. Please make a very great note of that, because I don't want you to fall into the trap of deceiving yourself. Now in others, you will start pretending, oh, Bhagwan, that's a sentient being. There's God in that being. I want to aid and benefit that being. But there's a God in you. How come you don't aid and benefit yourself? You see? Now you're not going to do any of those practices, that meditation, that sadhana, that is designed to liberate the divine in you so that it may fully spread its wings and flow out of the bridge. But you are hell-bent, you see, on liberating the divine in some other human being. Now, I submit this is madness. What I submit is that this is the pathology of arrogance and vanity. This is what it causes us to do, right? To move out of a very deep and a very difficult self-deception. So the first task then is to try to understand that the divine is in each and every single one of us, with no exception, fully and equally present in all. The only difference is that in some individuals, there are fewer obstacles that allows this light to shine through. There were so many years I actually walked around thinking that other people were stupid, just like you. I mean, so I'm not fussing at you. I'm trying to rescue you from the same fallacy that I fell into. You see, because they certainly looked as stupid. You know what I mean? And I had collected good evidence that this is in fact a bona fide, certified stupid person. I had the proof right in my hand. But what I came to realize with the help and grace of the Master and the access to the Dharma in the was that there is no such thing as a stupid human being. If by stupid you mean that there is no intelligence residing in that. Stupidity then is nothing but a block, an obstacle that interferes with the natural flow of that individual's intelligence. And if, in fact, you are going to be of some use to that individual, is to help them remove the barrier so that the light of intelligence in them can manifest itself and shine. But how will you do that if you have not worked on yourself? Compassion in the work of a bodhisattva is not something you can do from simply reading books. Yes, reading books on becoming a bodhisattva is very inspiring, no doubt about it. And I am not sitting here minimizing that. But that is not reading about being a bodhisattva. Reading about having compassion for all sentient beings is a very different phenomenon. You see? Very different than simply reading the books. It requires skill. And a kind of skill that can only be had and it only results when we work on our own self. That is why all masters, all saints say that goal should remain there, that we become enlightened so that we may benefit all sentient beings. It's never that benefit all sentient beings and then become enlightened. It doesn't work like that. Become enlightened, and out of that enlightenment you benefit. Or you benefit as your enlightenment unfolds, it is constantly being recycled into the system, the human system. But it's not like I'm going to do my bodhisattva work and then I'm going to work on becoming enlightened. What kind of bodhisattva work would you be doing? You see, there is no skillful means in that. Again, that is ego, arrogance, masquerading as a virtuous intent. So we have to begin to get a good understanding then of the basis by which we can drop this arrogance. We have to begin to develop the view that enables us to naturally drop this arrogance as naturally as a ripened piece of fruit falls from a limb. But it almost becomes without effort. You see, it simply drops away because you see it clearly. Your awareness sees it clearly. And when you are able to begin to, even if you cannot fully open the eye of your mind and see clearly the divine in another, if you can just have the intuition, the suspicion that God is in another human being, that will help you much. You see? Even if you have just the belief that God is in other human being, although I'm not much on beliefs, you all know that, but even in this case, even a belief that God exists in, a strong belief that God exists in all sentient beings will help us come into a very different kind of relationship with other human beings and completely remove our feelings of arrogance and being better than and more important and more intelligent than other human beings. It is almost as outrageous as saying that you're conscious and no other human being on this planet is conscious. Can you see the madness in this position? Now you're the only being on the planet that is conscious, and all these other people out here are unconscious. Right? That's the same thing when when we begin to feel, well, I'm the most sincere, I'm the most intelligent, I'm the most dedicated. I mean, all of this is nonsense. You see? These qualities exist in all human beings. And we have to begin to develop the capacity to relate to other human beings with that understanding. Even as we sit here, I understand that inside of each and every one of you is this Buddhahood. You see? Enlightenment is already the case. It is not that you're going to be doing something to become, quote unquote, enlightened. That's a very wrong understanding of this whole thing called enlightenment. The case is that you are already enlightened. You have to think about it a little. And your enlightenment is already the case. Theravadaji, you have already attained Buddhahood. You have in you all that a Buddha, all that a Jesus, all that a Moses had, fully manifested. The only difference is that there may be a few obstacles and barriers that is interfering with the throughput of your Buddhahood. That is all. But that's the only difference. You see? That's the only difference. So it is actually this awareness deep down inside you that responds to the Dharma. Have you thought about it? What is it that responded to the teachings? What is it that caused you to respond to the call? Each satsang, we have brothers and sisters come and they tell their stories about how they came to the path and things of that nature. And actually, you see, explaining how you come to the path is like trying to also explain why you love somebody. Now, there are certain things that defy logic and reason. Dhamma Majid, you agreeing? Huh? Yes. Now, someone, Brother Akins, asks you, why you love this woman? Or probably more realistically, Sister Akins asks you, why you love this man? I want to try to keep us somewhere in the margin of reality. Right? What do you see in him? Right? They're able to look at him and see all of his faults, all of his shortcomings, all of his weaknesses, all of his improvements. They're able to just really present a hard case against him. Right? They have evidence. They got proof. You understand? And they ask you, why you love this man? And sometimes when you make attempts to answer those questions, well, I love him because of this, and I love him because of that, but it's really not because of those things. You see, those are the things that you're mentioning out of the love. The love is already the case. It is your love that makes, well, I like his eyes are pretty. No, his eyes are not pretty, but your love makes them beautiful, you see. And you thinking that your love for him is coming from him, coming from the outside, based on his qualities, based on his eyes, his personality, his sense of humor, his eloquence, etc. Right? Don't want to beat up on Brother Akins too, because all human beings have work. But you get my point. We cannot explain why we love. We cannot really reduce it to a rational explanation. Because It is occurring from somewhere deep down inside of us, beyond the reach of logic. It defies the confinement to logic. And all you can say, well, I don't know why I love this woman. I just love this woman. Let that be enough. You see? I just love. That's all I can say. Right? In the same way, you see, we respond to the teachings out of that same deep sea. Oh, what I heard this person talking about it, and that just went in like, got to me. So it will be called, this person spoke the Dharma that caused me. No. If a bird had a whistle Dharma, it would have impacted you. You see? There was something in you, deep inside of you, that is responding. And what is it? It is that thing inside of you that is capable of discerning wisdom. Fully developed, shining through all of the layers and covers and quagmire covering it, and still able to pick up the experience of the encounter with it. There's something in us that has not lost the capacity to see beauty. Do you understand me? Right? And when you can see the beauty, for instance, sister, in Brother Atkins, that is what fills you with joy. Whenever you are able to perceive the beauty in anything, the payoff is that it fills you with joy. Hence, the importance of the beauty. It's a great food, a great substance. Now, a beautiful piece of music, right? I know you like the old school. Is that right? Right? Be like old school. So you hear some smoky and you hear some dusties and things that takes you back to those days, right? It just fills you with something. It's beautiful and makes you feel. So I want us to try to understand that this divine spirit, this thing that we call God, exists in all of us equally. Not only does it exist in all of us equally, it exists throughout the universe. It is already manifested in us. And our task is simply to remove the barriers. And I don't know if we even can get credit for that, because this intelligence inside of us is actually removing its own barriers. It is shedding its skin. Do you follow me? There's an analogous phenomena that you see in nature. Animals shedding skin, shedding fur, right? As the spirit begins to unfold and come into greater and greater manifestation, it starts shedding. And one of the telltale signs that the spirit is beginning to break through to deeper and deeper levels of our psyche, coming into the level of our psyches, is that you begin to see the falling away of arrogance. You see? I look better than this person, so and so. It's just absolute madness, just nonsense. And so we have to then begin to work with this kind of lowest kind of egotism, right? That is manifest in the form of our arrogance. Therefore, the Master says that we have to cultivate its opposite quality, which is humility. The antidote then for dealing with our arrogance and our vanity and our egotism is the cultivation of its opposite, which is authentic humility. So we will have to say a little something about humility, you see, because this is the science of transformation. Like in all sciences, if you want this, then do that. Remember, I talked about the fact that you must have some kind of injunction, some kind of exemplar, some kind of experimental thing. That if you do this, you will apprehend that. And then you may verify it amongst the community of fellow scientists. The masters, with no exception across all time and space and cultures, have suggested a very powerful practice to offset the arrogance, and that is the cultivation of humility. But by cultivating humility, I do not mean walking around beating up on yourself. Oh, I'm no good. I don't do my meditation. I don't do this. That's not humility. That's pathological. That's masochistic. You understand? You enjoy being a victim. You get a rush out of that. You see what I'm saying? There is no place on the path for guilt. Guilt doesn't belong on this path. This is science. If you are feeling guilty, you are probably experiencing some underground egotism. Feelings of guilt are just as egotistically based as feelings of arrogance, because you remain the focus. You follow my point? So the cultivation then of humility is not simply walking around beating up on ourselves. Then what is it? The masters say at its lowest level, the cultivation of humility begins by first becoming very, very aware of your imperfections, shortcomings, and faults. Don't invent them. You don't have to invent them. There's some people that are inventing stuff, right? Because they want to win the contest as being the most useless, worthless person on the planet. You got them, they're competing all over. You see them everywhere. Nobody is more worthless, nobody is more useless and pitiful than me. Sheer arrogance, masquerading as humility. I am worse off than anybody. Nobody is suffering as much as me. Nobody has messed up more than me. I have done more, I've made more mistakes than anybody on the planet. Arrogance. Maharaji says that we are to become just naturally aware of our imperfections. With the understanding that my worth and value as a being is unconditional. It is a priori. It is I exist, therefore I have worth and value. Case is closed. But by becoming very aware of one's own imperfection, shortcoming, and faults, you see, that helps aid in the counteracting against our tendency to elevate ourselves over other people. It kind of slows us down when we get on our high horses and our pedals and start moralizing and shooting all over people. Well, you know, on South, you should be doing this. The implication is that you don't know what you're doing, but I do. Therefore, I'm more intelligent than you. We have to begin to see our own imperfections, shortcomings, in a psychologically, emotionally, and mentally healthy way, where we're not, just masochists who are taking great joy and pointing out all our shortcomings and faults. That begins to level our vision, our views. Humility then creates a kind of oneness. Remember, either you are moving in relationship to other human beings out of arrogance, or you will move out of humility. Those are the two possibilities. When you move out of humility, you move closer to people. The tendency is to merge into the whole, to become one, right? I'm not better than anybody. I'm just to really merge. It is a movement toward the oneness of people. Arrogance is an ego-based activity, and the tendency is to contract and pull back and separate out and isolate yourself, right? And then you disguise this ego movement as either I am better than all people and therefore they are not worthy of my company, or I am worse than all people and I don't want to, damage them. But both are egos. Statements. You see, they just are turned upside down. Same thing. Is that it is an avoidance of relationship with the whole. Humility begins to break down the barriers that creates this feeling of separation from others, where we are able to not only see our own humanity, but as a result of that, we are able to see the humanity in other people. And when we don't walk in those shoes, and when we have a clear view of all of the stuff that we have done, all of the imperfection in us, now it becomes very difficult to become judgmental and critical. The whole tendency is to become Dhammaji, more compassionate. You see? Because you understand. And you begin to have even deeper insights. You begin to see that that human being has worth and value just like me, in spite of their imperfection, shortcomings, fault. Case closed. Case is actually closed. And then you see a little further, say that, my God, now you're beginning to see the divine in that person. That person starts getting kind of sacred to you, right? It becomes a whole different experience. And as we cultivate this humility, it creates the context, you see, where we are better able to apply ourselves to our spiritual practices. And it is our spiritual practices that will elevate us into these higher and higher levels of consciousness and view until we are ultimately able to see who we really are. To see that this Buddhahood, this Jesushood, this Moseshood, this Muhammadhood, this Kabirhood is already the case. It is a very, very difficult thing to put into words. So now, we have some time left and we never get a chance to have as much interactive discussion as I like to have. And so, you're most welcome to comment on anything that has been said. Yes?
Bhagwan, you just said that when you remain in the world, you're operating out of two streams. Either you are using arrogance or you are using humility. And my question is, when you're on the spiritual path, you know, I oftentimes feel very different from people I work with, maybe people in my building, even family members. It's sometimes hard not to feel a little different. I guess what you're helping me to see is that feeling different might be some arrogance. But my question is about the humility. For someone who is acting out of humility, won't that sometimes be misread as being, I don't know, when I think about people who are humble, and you have given us the side of humility as not being the wimpy kind of person, but doesn't the world sort of misread people who present themselves with humility? Isn't that why people kind of don't like to act out of that role, because they get misread, they get stepped on, they get abused, and maybe I'm still not quite understanding what humility means.
You see, we have as a culture a very wrong definition of humility. Just as, for instance, we have a very wrong definition of forgiveness. Just as in the case with forgiveness, we don't usually see forgiveness as an act that we do in our own behalf. You forgive other people. I mean, you expunge them. You know what I mean? And etc. We see, and that makes it very difficult for us to behave in a very forgiving way, because we think that by forgiving a person, that we are legitimatizing or condoning their behavior that has caused us a grievance, you see. Whereas in fact, when we forgive another human being, it is an act that we do in our own behalf to give us some relief from the resentment, you see, and the agony that accompanies that resentment that we carry around in ourselves. So again, the same kind of cultural, colloquial distortion of the meaning of humility permeates our culture. And in our culture, humility has been equated with docility and naivete and so forth and so on. But humility is a very different thing. Actually, those people who are humble are the strongest people on this land. You see?
But the world doesn't see that.
No, of course not. You see? Of course not. But the world is one thing, right? And the path is another. You mentioned the fact that you are working with people who are different. Yes, there are differences. Make no mistake about it. But difference does not mean inequality. You see my point? And those differences is only on the peripheral of our being. Now, our bodies are different weights, different shape, but all of them have 208 bones or whatever it is. Ray is the chemist, and this is the science of it, so they can tell us all of that, you see. It is still made up of atoms and molecules and all of these other things, right? Rearranged in a very unique way, much like snowflakes. You see? So yes, there are differences, yes, bound to be. But we mustn't confuse seeing differences as seeing meaning that we are either superior or inferior. In fact, no comparison can be made in those respects. As I said before, how do you compare apples to apples? You see, how do you compare consciousness to consciousness, spirit to spirit, life to life, A to A? There's no way. You can only experience differences and make contrast between these differences when we don't have the view of the oneness of things. As long as we cannot see at the level of the oneness of things, then we have no other choice then but to see at the level of duality and differences. And seeing at that level is very problematic, because the thing is this, that just as in psychology, we understand the concept of pre-operational cognitive abilities, meaning simply that there are stages in the cognitive development of human beings where the capacity to reflect on their perceptions has not emerged. Like your daughter, for instance, all of her perceptions that she sees them as being an accurate representation of reality. She is not able to pull back from her perceptions, right, and reflect on them. If we show her two glasses, one tall, one short, with the same, and then we take the water out of the short glass and pour it into the tall glass, and then ask her, does the glass have more water? She will tell you yes. Because she is not able to pull back and abstractly see that the water is of the same quantity. In the same way, you see, when we do not have the capacity to see at the level of oneness, to see oneness, then we will see differences. And those will be our perceptions. And by definition, we don't have the capacity yet to pull back from the perception of manyness in order to see the oneness. It is sort of like, Pam, an optical delusion occurring in consciousness. You see my point? And the whole ideal, you see, is through the practice of meditation, right? We are able to accelerate the evolution, you see, of consciousness. And as that consciousness evolves, it begins to manifest new and greater and more comprehensive skills. Just as you are able to experience more of the reality that is available to you now than you could when you were a child, because you have moved to those cognitive, well, is that right? First, don't let me get carried away here. We must verify every step I take here, right? But the point is that all of us hopefully have been able to experience firsthand how our whole capacity to experience more of the reality that surrounds us has increased with the increase in the developmental stages of our various modes, you see? In the same way as we evolve spiritually, it opened up a wider vista. We're able to see more, and see more accurately and more clearly the reality. And that seeing reality at a higher level impacts on our whole sense of identity. It shapes our whole morality and all of these other things. they all experience a similar shift. So, yes, there is a great misperception about humility, but that is the misperception of people who are spiritually pre-operation and do not have the spiritual capacity to reflect on the apparent reality of things that they're seeing. They can't pull back inside. I hope that helps me a little bit. Yes, brother?
But with that explanation, coming into line with the comparison between humility on the ego, as far as the ego is concerned, and humility based on neglect, just outright neglect. I'm not sure if I'm getting this question.
Go ahead. Break it
You know
down.
what I'm saying? All right. What I'm looking at is the humility you experience by you knowing your shortcomings, acknowledging your shortcomings. Doesn't necessarily have to have manifest by your designing it to be that way. It just happens to be part of your shortcomings that you acknowledge.
Yeah.
But the neglect that you, that humility that you manifest by something you know, all right, consciously that you went this route, but you're saying to yourself, or you justifying, well, I feel bad about, or either I have this problem with this because of.
Yes.
Am I?
Well, I'm not sure, but you can help me better understand it. Because again, the experience and feeling of humility is not the same as the experience of remorse and guilt and these kind of things. That's not humility per se. Sometimes, for instance, when you are defeated, we say in the world that you've been humbled, right? But actually, you've been defeated. You've been conquered. And the feeling of being defeated and conquered are not the same feelings of humility at all, right? The feelings of being defeated and conquered, carries baggage. Now there's some anger there, right? There's some thirst for revenge. There's some shame for even being too weak to defend yourself or to prevail against the situation or circumstances, etc., etc. When we have failed as a result of our own doings, right? But not within the context of humility. That failure was not experienced or processed within the context of our humility. When it's processed within the context of our arrogance, now that fills us with a lot of guilt and remorse and all other kinds of things. But humility is just a very clean thing. Humility comes from within. It does not come from without. Humility is not the result of things that you do out there. Humility is the result of things you do in here. You see the difference? The direction is different. Now again, I don't know if that's exactly what you were getting towards, Brother Cecil. But Brother Unsab here was able to answer your question precisely. So I'll let him take a stab at it.
Once I was told that humility is an accurate knowledge of where you are and where you want to go. So if I was approached by someone that I truly believe could beat the living hell out of me, humility coming from the inside would allow the individual to do what it is he wanted to do. Because I had the knowledge that I can't handle this.
Yes.
And that would be humility.
Yes.
Now, if I had arrogance, I would get the living hell out of me.
Absolutely.
And I would be defeated. And I would be resentful and all those other things, like you said. So being humble would be to allow him to have his way to whatever degree it would be okay. And I wouldn't be defeated. And I wouldn't have the resentment and all those other things that go along with it.
That's absolutely right. I think Unsab, as usual, you rescue us from what could otherwise have been a very complex metaphysical debate on the distinctions.
I think also that comes with that too. Something that you said that when we approach somebody with humility, approaching this person, this fictional person that I brought up with humility, would allow him or her to possibly overcome some barriers and not want to hurt you.
Absolutely. It diffuses their fear. When you are moving humbly in your relationships, right? It removes a lot of the perception of threat that people have, you see. It tends to relax them more, makes them want to cooperate, to not see you as a danger. Because anytime we are perceived as a danger by other people, that perception causes a reaction in them. And you remember from your anger insights that it is the perception of a threat, a danger to your well-being that triggers anger in the first place, because it first triggers fear. But when no one sees you as being dangerous, one of the great African sages on his delay was written these words, that I have lived my life so effectively, so in tune with my art, that I, in the course of a long life, there was not one individual that was ever afraid of me. It's profound. Now you just think about how many people is afraid of you. And why are they afraid of you? Some of your kids are afraid of you. Your wife is afraid of you. Why are all these people so afraid of you? Investigate that. You see, it could be then that they perceive you as a threat to their well-being and have responded to that because they could not see the fact that you ain't nobody. You see? And certainly nobody to be afraid of. Yes, Sister Vanity?
Bhagwan, I just want to say, I want to make an announcement after this, so
Yes.
people would want on the trail.
Yes, by all means. Yes, Sister?
So, if I'm measuring, or if I'm determining whether I'm acting out of humility or arrogance, where I would go to is my results, my experience, how I experienced what occurred. So, if I'm helping someone, and if I'm determining whether the reason that I'm helping them is because I think I'm better than them and they need me, versus that there's some differences there that I can help them break down a barrier, where I determine whether I've acted out of humility or arrogance is in results, is in
And you access,
experience.
you access inside and see how it makes you feel. Because when you're functioning out of humility, this seeing of the sacred in the other, right? This understanding that the sacred exists behind that person's imperfection, shortcoming, and fault. When you're seeing that the same is the case with you, there's a whole different kind of gestalt, and you can feel it. It's just like, for instance, how do you know when you're hearing something beautiful? Like, you don't look outside. There's no empirical with things, right? The place to validate whether the song sounds good or not is in you. You feel it, right? In the same way, there's a kind of beauty that occurs. I'll give you an example, for instance. When one has perfected this capacity to function out of humility, one becomes Dhammaji, a Bodhisattva. Now, we have to understand that in Christian mysticism, that Jesus has presented a model of bodhisattvahood that is simply unparalleled. Just simply unparalleled. And what is so unique about His Holiness Jesus the Christ was that He was able to transmit the experience of being loved to other human beings. In fact, and do it in such a powerful way that when that experience of them being loved and having worth and value, in spite of their ignorance and in spite of their checkered and flawed background, was transformed and turned fishermen into saints. In the same way, when one approaches another human being out of your humility, you are now able to transmit into the relationship the experience of worth to that other person, because you're not judging, right? And you feel it inside of yourself. You feel it inside of yourself. How, for instance, sister, do you experience another person's love for you? Maybe we should start with the little things first. Huh? Now, how do you know? Huh? Too big? Is there anything small? I don't know. I can't go lower than that. But how do you, when a person loves you, how do you know?
You just know.
You just know it. Yes, of course, I agree. You just know. But you know it by, in what sense? Do you know it physically? Do you know it cognitively? How do you know it?
You know it inside. You feel it. You experience it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you love somebody, right, the only way to know it is by feeling it inside yourself. You know it, don't you? Now, this other person may be doubtful, right? They may say, no, well, you really don't love me, right? Because your love may be presented in such a way that they are not able to process it. Just as we have learning styles, right? We auditory or visual or tactile, right? And our learning style dictates how we learn, right? And so if a person is a visual person and if we wish to share knowledge with them, then we need to construct that knowledge in a visual format or an audio format, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes we have to put our love in the right form for it to get through to another person. That's another issue. But the point is that we are aware of our love. So when you say, how do I know when I am being humble? Right? It is self-evident, as all things of truth are. Like love is self-evident, right? Truth is self-evident. This humility is self-evident. Yes, brother?
Brother Bhagwan.
Yes, brother.
Feelings. Is there another source that, because God knows I made a lot of mistakes on feelings.
When you say on this side, this is the mistake side. You say on this side, I made no mistakes. I don't know how you got mixed up. But in any case,
Is there any other source that that you can put with feelings to know on the inside that this is the right thing to do?
Are you asking me that how do you use feelings to determine whether what you're doing is right or wrong?
Right.
Is that what you're asking? Maharaji used to always say, all saints say that you can kind of use a kind of rule of thumb. And it's just a kind of rule of thumb until one will reach a level where one will know these things, right, without having to resort to rule of thumbs. But until then, a rule of thumb is this, that if the thing that you are doing is making you more loving, filling you with more compassion, you see, creating a greater sense of oneness, right, that is removing sorrow and suffering on a personal level, you see, then that is you're moving in the right direction. If the reverse is occurring, if it is making you more hard-hearted, more cruel, more cynical, etc., if it's causing other people more pain, more suffering, right, then you're probably moving in a counterproductive direction. You see? The way the saints have put it, they said that either you are moving in the direction of love or you are moving in the direction of fear. The difference and how you know those differences is that when you're moving in the direction of love and truth, you have certain experience. It's just like as I said already, whenever we have the experience of the beautiful, it fills us with a bliss, doesn't it? When one has the experience of the truth, it also fills you with a certain bliss. In the East, therefore, we say that this experience is threefold. Sat, Chit, Ananda, right? It is true, of course, right? And et cetera, but Ananda means it is also blissful. It's interesting. We don't normally think that truth produces an emotional response in our being. Is that right? But that might be because you've not heard deep truth, right? Must have been some book somewhere that you read or some poetry that you read or something, but that truth hit you. And it just, Damamaji, I know that this has happened to you on many occasions, huh? Right? Where the truth hits, right? And it produced tears. You understand? Truth impacts on you just like good music, good drama, good literature. Nay, in fact, it impacts deeper, because when the masters and the mystics are able to transmit wisdom to us, and we are able to receive that wisdom, it is so powerful, it completely transforms us. Just as love, when His Holiness Jesus the Christ transmitted to His disciples the experience of them being loved, when He washed their feet, they were shocked and said, Master, what is this? I'm nobody, I'm nothing, I'm ignorant, I'm a fisherman, you know, I'm a this, I'm a that. How is this possible? I'm not worthy of this. You understand? But it was in spite of their protestations that the great mystic washed the disciples' feet. Just gave them no sutras, no Upanishads, no Gita, no Bible, no Quran, no books. He gave them the experience of being worthwhile. And it was His transmission of the experience of them being worthy of love that transformed them. Now, other great mystics, like a Buddha or Lord Krishna, right, use other things, but they all are on that same plateau: love, truth. In Zen, what the Guru does is that the relationship is very different. In Zen, you see, it is always understood from day one that you are already enlightened. The approach is not like do this or do that and you become enlightened at all. In some forms of Tibetan Buddhism and the practices that they call darshan, there is no meditation. Sadraj, you might want to pay attention to this. Just be a little more patient. This might be some good stuff, right? And darshan, there is no meditation. You do no meditation. There is none of the simran and the bhajan and the concentrating of the mind. None of that is done. Because from the perspective of darshan, you are already God. You are already the case. There's nothing to do. How can you do something to be that which you really are? Your enlightenment is already the case. Your awareness, just as it is one of enlightenment. Now, of course, I'm not going to be able to go into all the details. Leave a little, drama, right, for the next one. But the point is that in darshan, you see, that is the starting point. And what the master does now is simply wait to the right time to point it out. And so in darshan tradition, they give pointing out instructions. Pointing out instruction means they tell you to look at your own, look at your awareness. Now, look at that and see that you are already a Buddha. The problem is not that you need to do anything to become a Buddha. The problem is you simply need to recognize that you are already enlightened. And that is the thing that distinguishes the Buddha from a Bhagwan or the Angsa or a Rataji. Is that the Buddha recognized that he is already enlightened. There is no need. Just recognize. Is that what the young folks say? You better recognize. Yes, Brother Akins.
In the story you told of Jesus' ability to make the person receive or feel love.
Yes.
I would think that would be a very humbling experience for the recipient, in a sense then that if one could perceive a love of that magnitude,
Yes.
then comparatively one would see where they are relative to that love,
Yes.
and the big gap in terms of what,
Yes.
and no matter how much you think you are capable of loving, you would have seen and learned quite instantly how deficient you really
Sure,
were.
you got a good measuring device. You get with Brother Akins at the end, and he'll write all that out. No extra charge. But your point is well taken, is that when we talk about, Jesus must have had perfect humility to be able to even do that in the first place, right?
Would be a humbling experience.
It was a humbling experience. And it was an experience that literally transformed those disciples. It had to, right? It had to transform them. You see, that cuts straight through. Because what is one of the greatest needs that we have as human beings? Setting aside our spirituality and things of that nature, but just psychologically and emotionally. What our needs is to have the experience of being worthwhile. It is that need to have the experience of worthwhile that causes us to move toward belongingness. We need to belong to some family, some group, some man, some woman, so that by their accepting us, it is able to enhance our experience of esteem and of being of value and worth, right? But very often, many groups and many people place so many conditions on what has to be the case before they confer worth and value and esteem on you, that many of us become discouraged. Now, I'm not going to acknowledge your worth and value as a human being unless you give me a big house, 3 cars, a fur coat, a diamond ring, right? Or you cook some good for me every day, give me super sex. I mean, it's absurd. And if you can't meet all these conditions, then I will not confer upon you this sought-for feeling of being worthwhile. You're not even good enough to be my husband, let alone be a human being. You see my point? And so there's a tendency then to withhold the experience. And so you can imagine now that when His Holiness Jesus the Christ was teaching the Dharma, right? By way of an existential practice, right? Of transmission of love. The experience had to be overwhelming. In fact, Peter said, well, you might well watch all of me. You see what I'm saying? I mean, I ain't worthy of my feet, but since this, I need a whole cleansing, you see. Peter took advantage of it. You see, he got full up with this beauty. So you're absolutely right. And then we can look at ourselves and see to what extent we are humble then, based on the Akins principle. Simply look and see to what extent you are able to transmit worth, value to another human being. Look and see if there's a lot of resistance in you. Look, feel, watch. Look and see if it's like pulling teeth for you to compliment your wife. Most of us would rather do anything in the world other than compliment the wife. Because there's a politics going on. It's to our advantage to keep them feeling that they're unworthy of us. And that keeps them striving. It feeds into our arrogance. You understand? It makes me feel important to have this woman chasing me, trying to hang on to me for dear life. Ooh, that feels good. It's a negative way of experiencing your worth and value. It's at the expense and the result of the exploitation of another human being. It is an ugly thing. You see? And the consequences that we undergo for that kind of spiritual violence is appropriate. But, Brother Akins, as you pointed out, you see, we can just feel and see to what extent we are able to transmit the experience of being loved to other human beings. Dhamma that's bodhisattva. It's not just giving them a book. That's transmission of information. Don't confuse that with what Buddha did. Buddha did not pass out the Bhagavad teachings in the Dhamma. There was none. None of those sutras came into composition for years. You see? And then the first ones constructed by Ananda and some of the other bhikkhus were very rudimentary. What was it that Buddha was transmitting? He was transmitting the experience of wisdom and knowledge of self. Powerful experiences. So these becomes then the Bismarck system. for measure our ability to be humble. Right? Yes. Any other questions, comments, or?
Yeah, Bhagwan. So then, in order for you to transmit that experience, you've got to not only feel it inside you to be able to transmit it, but you also got to be realizing that what you're giving them, you're giving back to yourself.
That's one way to look at it mathematically, but I'll tell you the only way that you can transmit the experience of being loved is to have been the recipients of a great love. You see, now this is the absolute truth. There is no kind of way you can manipulate yourself into it. This is not the result of a kind of logical, syllogistic, formulated thinking process at all. His Holiness Jesus the Christ said that I am able to love you, Peter, because my Father loved me first. Therefore, the first mystical experience that you will have on the path when you decide to follow. And remember, take your time. No problem, right? That which you are exists outside of time anyway. No big deal. But when you do decide, the first experience that you will have the experience of being loved by God. It's a strange thing. I can remember the rudimentary parts of that experience as a young man in my father's house on the west side, 18, right? And my father was an alcoholic, right? He, as he became older and more sober, decided suddenly to start disciplining me, right? Well, of course, this was, a challenge, right? And so I can remember one night, only very vaguely, because I remember the argument only out of the context of the stupor of my intoxication. I had been drinking and all kinds of things. You understand? I am a product of the community in every sense of the word, right? And so he chastised me and berated me as parents are wont to do to rebellious teenage sons, right? And I can remember, somehow out of my drunken stupor, right, my feelings of being invalidated and made to feel worthless by my father, who was tearing me up, you see? And what made it all the more painful was that you have no right to sit here, you see, and pass these judgments and critique me. I, as a young boy, came and took you home from the taverns and wiped puke from your mouth. As a young boy, I suffered and withstood the embarrassment of having to drag my own father home from taverns with his pants pockets turned inside out. That is a challenge for young boys to live with. The law will tell you. You see, he'll give you part 2. He can testify on this issue. And to now have this kind of quid pro quo violated, and just for this one incident, was too much for him. You see? And the conditions for him to restore his my worth and value in love, you see, was submission and all these other things. And I told him, keep that. And I told him, I said, I understand one thing. I would like to have your love, you see, but that's not always possible. Many kids don't have their parents' love. What can you do? Maybe it's my karma. I didn't know that terminology at that time, of course. But the sense was there. What I told my father was, look, as long as Jesus has love for me, and I know Jesus has love for me, that's enough love. I had experience, whether in my imagination or not, but I had experienced the love of God. I was convinced that God loves and takes care of me. Sometimes, you see, we say up on the path, right? Namo anami, baya. I take refuge in that which has created me. You understand? That's not an utterance, not poetry, not something you memorize, right? Doesn't become a part of your entertainment. You're stylized. It's a real feeling. Namor nami baya, I take refuge in that which has brought me into being. And by its tender loving kindness, like the kindness of a mother, may I overcome my sorrows and suffering. Take refuge in that. And that refuge will get me through, right? So you must then, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, first have the experience of being loved. And then that experience of you having been loved gives you the skill and the ability and the motivations to transmit the experience of love to other people. You see how this works for us? So, if you look at your life now, you don't even feel grateful. You are bitching and moaning all the time. What is up with that? Not only can you not having the experience of universe taking care of you, you can't even have the experience of gratitude. That's the minimum experience that you must have. You must have feelings at least of gratitude. Yes?
If you really feel the gratitude, then doesn't that allow you to experience how much you're loved?
Yes. Gratitude, the feeling of gratitude is a feeling that goes along with the recognition that you have been loved. That something has been done for you, that has been good for you, beneficial for you, that has been in your interest. You see, whether it was painful or not is another issue, but it was something that has resulted in a better state of your own will, and you feel grateful. Now, Brother Theravada Ji, if you go and you give Sandra, $2,000 or $3,000, it's just an example, so don't get nervous. Just use this as an example. I know these kind of things, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Out of hand here, right? All right? And you give that to her, right? And you give it to her at a time when she's just at the end of her financial road, right? And that giving of that to her will usually generate in a normal person a feeling of gratitude, right? It won't say, well, damn, about time you gave me some $2,000. But you see what I'm saying? When people give us stuff, that's how we react. Well, you see what I mean? You're supposed to do this here, right? We don't have the experience of gratitude even in our relationship with our wives and husbands. I can see the difficulty in having the experience of gratitude coming from a non-physical, metaphysical, unembodied place called God. I can understand that, because that's a non-embodied experience, right? But your mate, your brothers, your sister, think about it. People have done so much for you. You are here because somebody has loved you. Do you think, Brother Cecil, you on this planet because of your own resourcefulness? Do you think you got where you are at now? Just being able to sit here and breathe and talk and have a nice conversation this evening on your own? Of course not. In you, there are thousands of years of love that has made you up. You are made up of as much as of love as you are of genetic material, right? You are made of love. I don't know if you understand this. Love has made you and brought you into being. And it is people's love for you that is sustaining. But we feel absolutely no gratitude for it. You don't think about your big mamas, your grandmother. You don't think about the old folks, them ancestors who perished in the Ma'afa for your sake. That's for the Sahawas. See my point? So we have to at least become evolved enough to have the experience of gratitude. And when you know what it feels like to be aided and rescued, then that triggers in you the desire to pass it on. You follow my point, Bharataji? So it's in that context then that I mean that until and unless we have a mystical experience of being loved, we will not be motivated and triggered into transcending love. And that is the advantage of the company of gurus, is that they transmit to us the experience of being loved. They do nothing else. Everything else is smoke and mirrors. You see what I'm saying? Just smoke and mirrors. It is the transmission of the experience of being loved that transforms us. And that is the magic. Well, I can see you are tired and bored with this conversation, so I think we might have had enough for the day. If there's no other questions or comments, I'd like to wish all of the mothers in the house a very happy and loving Mother Day to you. You are certainly well deserving of that. And all of my mother beings who are in these male bodies, the same is the case with you. I wish you a happy belated Mother Day as well from your previous birth. So at least I'm acknowledging it now.